The sound of shattering crystal was nothing compared to the wet, rhythmic crunch of vertebrae being separated from a living host. Zora watched, her shadow form vibrating in sudden, agonizing density, as David Ashton reached into the darkness. There was a sickening pull. He held the operative's spine like a prize. Tread carefully through these archives. Some truths are not meant to be held by the weak, for they burn the very shadow they touch. He sings when he thinks no one is listening, Zora had whispered to her sisters only hours before. Now, the memory of her own mocking laughter tasted like cold, dead ash in her mouth. The Great Hall of Crystal was a masterwork of Nelvari architecture, a place where light didn't just shine but danced through the shifting densities of the ruling caste. Zora sat at the head of the obsidian table, her shadow form a shimmering, translucent violet that pooled around her throne like silk. She was the Hive Mother, the anchor of this system, and everything in this room belonged to her by divine right. Her red eyes tracked the movement of the attendants, but they always settled back on the small, solid creature sitting at the far end of the table. David Ashton was a curiosity, a biological accident she had found hiding in the vents of her flagship. He was so wonderfully, pathetically solid. He wore a scarf of soft, gray wool, draped neat across his narrow shoulders. It was a gift from Zora, a leash of fabric for her favorite pet. He ate the warm, spiced meats of the Nelvari with a quiet efficiency that she found charming, if somewhat primitive. Around them, the dining hall hummed with the melodic voices of high-ranking shadowkin, a harmony of power and prestige. Zora felt a surge of smug ownership. How fortunate this human was to be under her protection, to exist in a world where density was a choice rather than a prison. To the Nelvari, to be solid was to be vulnerable, yet here he was, thriving in his limitations. He was a masterpiece of biological irrelevance, a creature of bone and breath. "Look at him," Zora signaled to her kin, her red eyes glowing with amusement. "He spends his mornings waving at the palace guards as if they were his equals. It is a miracle he has survived this long without a keeper." The guards, of course, waved back now, though they did it quickly and with great confusion. Such a fragile thing, Zora thought as she leaned forward, the shadows of her face shifting into a smile. "He sings when he thinks no one is listening, sisters. A thin, reedy sound that carries no weight in the shadow currents. He is a decorative creature, nothing more." David did not look up. He continued to cut his meat, his focus entirely on the plate before him. But the human simply chewed, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he was the punchline of a joke spanning 3 star systems. It was fascinating how the human could remain so unbothered by the cosmic weight of the Nelvari presence. Zora often wondered if his brain was even capable of processing the true nature of his surroundings, or if he simply perceived them as a collection of pretty lights and strange smells. She watched the way his fingers moved, stiff, bone-locked, and slow. To a creature made of shifting shadows, the human was a statue that occasionally moved. He was a biological relic, a reminder of the crude beginnings from which true intelligence had supposedly evolved. He was her favorite toy, and she would keep him safe in this crystal cage forever. A sharp, discordant chime rang through the hall as the crystal walls themselves seemed to recoil. A shadow operative, a renegade of the outer rim whose form was a jagged stain of violet malice, phased into the room. Panic erupted instantly. My sisters shifted into frantic, mist-like states, their voices becoming high-pitched whines of terror that vibrated against the obsidian table. The assassin held a void blade, a weapon designed to sever the very essence of a shadow form. I tried to shift, to hide, but my density failed me in the wake of such raw, predatory intent. The palace was no longer a sanctuary of light. It was a cage. David Ashton stayed seated while the world around him screamed in terror. He didn't look at the threat. He didn't look at me. The human reached down with a slow, deliberate grace that felt like a rift in the universe. His hand moved to his side. Not to a weapon, to a scar. His gray scarf caught wind from the operative's phasing, fluttering like the wing of a dying bird against his throat. He stood up without a sound. The silence coming from him was not the quiet of a pet or the stillness of a decorative creature. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a void. Focus. The operative lunged, moving with the fluid grace of a creature that could choose its own weight and trajectory. I expected a scream, a spray of red on the obsidian, or the simple erasure of the human's solid life. Instead, the human moved. Nelvari logic suggests that solidity is a prison, yet he exploited that density with a precision that defied our understanding of physics. He stepped into the operative's guard, his bone-locked hands seizing the attacker with the force of a collapsing star, pulled the spine out. The sound was a wet, structural failure that echoed off the crystal domes. The operative was forced into a permanent, agonizing state of solidity as its core was ripped from its center. I felt the species' fear response trigger in my own marrow. My shadow form hardened instantly. My mist became cold, brittle stone. For the first time in my existence, I was truly irrevocably solid because I was terrified of the creature I had called a toy. In the vacuum of the hall, the human didn't even gasp. Humans can hold their breath for over 2 minutes in toxic environments, a biological stubbornness that translates into a terrifying focus when the air vanishes. David used that internal pressure to anchor his strike, dropping the white, glistening remains onto the floor like a piece of discarded trash. "The guards wave back now," I whispered, my voice a brittle crack in the stillness. Quickly, he looked at me. His eyes were dark, flat, and entirely foreign. "No, I'm not angry. This is what focus looks like." The world I knew was gone. The decorative thing at my table was a horror that had allowed me to believe I was the master simply because it was convenient for him. He walked toward me, his boots thudding against the floor with a weight that made the crystal groan. He took the gray scarf from his neck. The wool wrapped her in the warmth of a terrifying, solid truth. He sat back down and reached for his cup. The steam rose in the frozen air as if the violence had never occurred.